Hello and welcome back to your regularly scheduled programming of Reap the Spoils. This is a podcast where we pick a video game, play it, and then spoil it for all of you. Hopefully you've played it, because if you haven't, you're going to have a really bad time. My name is Mark Sullivan.
I'm Delaila Lugo.
I am Jason Kwasnicki.
You know, I completely forgot after 2 E3 episodes that we usually start off with that. Like that's my fault. All right, next time we'll do better. Next time I'll do better next time.
It's fine.
Well, we didn't have notes for those episodes. It was off the cuff, but it was fun.
Yeah, it was. It was good. If you don't know what we're talking about, we recorded 2 episodes for E3, a predictions episode before E3 and a roundup episode after E3 with our opinions and tallying up the points of the predictions that we got right and wrong and all that.
We had so much fun. I was a bit of a bad boy. I had to be edited.
Ultra sassy.
Yes, that was a good rant that just got completely cut. We're not going to go into that though.
But you should watch the episodes.
Or listen.
They're a
to
lot
them.
of fun.
Yeah,
Or not watch them, listen to them.
Well, you can watch them. It's just going to be a still image of the E3 logo.
Yeah.
But, Delaila, what game are we talking about today?
Days Gone.
Yes. We are talking about Days Gone.
It's aptly named, how many days are gone because I wasted them on it.
Wow. Well, that answers my first question. That I wasn't even ready for yet, but we'll get to that momentarily.
I'm being facetious.
So yeah, we had to take a little extra time. Apologies for that, to get through this game, because we'll get into why in a little bit. But first, I want to start off with a brief, but hopefully informative history lesson of the game Days Gone by Sony Bend Studio. Development on this game started in early 2015, and it was revealed at E3 2016 on Sony stage with 2 presentations. You guys remember that?
No, I don't remember
Nope.
2. I just remember seeing one with a bunch of zombos chasing the main character, and I was like, "Ooh, that looks cool."
So
and
it was the same E3 as it was the same E3 God of War was revealed, and they opened up with God of War, which was an amazing reveal. It was incredible. And then I think the second trailer they showed right after that was the Days Gone trailer, where no one really knew what the hell the game was. It had the theme and Deacon and Sarah on the bike behind him, and it was a little monologue from him, and then Days Gone with
Which had me really excited at first because, as we were just talking about briefly before the show, I'm a big Sons of Anarchy fan. So I was like, yeah, cool, a game about, an MC, motorcycle club. And then there were zombies, and my interest immediately plummeted.
Yo, fun fact, I had to Google what MC stood for. They said MC, and I'm like, the hell? Is that a DJ thing? Was he a DJ at some point? I have no idea.
Our host, boys and girls.
You know what? I don't know anything about motorcycle culture. I learned a lot from this game. I learned a lot about motorcycle culture from this game, but I knew nothing going in. But anyway, they showed that trailer earlier in the game, or in the presentation, and then we went through the entire E3 presentation, and they ended their presentation with a gameplay demo of Days Gone, which was at the sawmill. He was looking for some guy and found him. The guy got eaten by a bunch of freakers, and then he's running through the sawmill, and it ends up with him on top of that silo, egging them on to come get him. So that we weirdly saw Days Gone twice in that same presentation. Once at close to the very beginning and once at the very end. It was kind of an odd choice. In my opinion.
I only remember the one at the end. I don't even remember the first one you mentioned.
The initial reveal was just, it was frankly kind of forgettable because didn't really tell you anything about the game.
Right.
But got that reveal in 2016, and the whole idea was they would be using Unreal 4 with a strong emphasis on narrative. We originally got a release date to come on February 22nd, but it wound up of 2019, and it wound up getting delayed to April 26th, 2019, the very end of April. So It took us the entirety of May, basically, at least Jason and I, to play through this game. That's why we're recording mid to late June.
Also keep in mind we have lives.
Yes, we do have
So-
lives.
Lives and E3 and
Really, this is E3's fault. Let's just blame E3.
and also the game's fucking long.
Yes, the game was really long. But some good news. Despite some mediocre, lukewarm to somewhat positive review scores, the game did sell.
The protagonist
really
was too
well.
white, according to GameSpot.
I was hoping we wouldn't get political here.
I wasn't trying to get. I was just trying to be funny.
The game sold extraordinarily well. It had the 7th highest debut in sales for a Sony title. Sony's had a lot of titles. To be the 7th highest is pretty big. And the game weirdly sold really well in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think the Japanese have like fetishes for American bikers?
Well, okay.
in the same way, like people like you, Mark, have fetishes for like Japanese girls.
All right, I will set that.
Does he really?
No, Jason, for fuck's sake. So, I will say about the Japanese.
Jason just spit soda out of his mouth, or whatever that is.
It is soda.
I will say they do really like how we have weebs here. They basically have weebs, but for America and Americana.
Yeah, they're really into baseball. I know that.
Baseball is a sport there, but
Yeah.
when I lived there, they did have. I did often see like Japanese like teenagers wearing like New York Jets sweaters.
Yeah.
And, like I think like a Knicks baseball cap at some, or like one of those Tops caps.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Like you'd see, and there was like a bar near my dorm that also like just was filled with stuff regarding Americana. Lots of cars, especially.
I imagine there's also a lot of business, like back from the days. I mean, I think we still have bases there when American troops were stationed there in mass. A lot of businesses built specifically for American business.
Yeah.
I'm over here just thinking it's because PlayStation's in Japan.
Well, it's just it's strange to me because to me we've all played this game. It doesn't. We know kind of like what the Japanese, what kind of games they like. This doesn't really cry out like Japanese to me, as a game that the Japanese would really appreciate or like and enjoy.
Right. Like Persona 5 made total sense, but this game, not so much.
Yeah, it's like it's not a JRPG. I guess that's the thing. It's not a JRPG, so it surprises me that the Japanese enjoyed it. And it also sold really well in the UK. I forget the exact sales debut numbers.
No joke to make there, because nobody has fetishes for the British. Damn lobster coats.
I don't know, man. Have you heard their accents?
Yeah, that's why we had a revolution.
Oh my god. So yeah, that's my brief history of Days Gone. Interjected with some nonsense. So shall we jump into it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Into the game? The game that took us a month to finish?
Let's do this.
All right. Do we want to just crack open that can and start off with the opening? What'd you guys think of how the game opened?
It was fine. Like it wasn't like, oh my god, like The Last of Us, the way The Last of Us opened. I like cried 5 seconds later. But this game, it was like, oh, okay, his like wife is injured and she's like being sent off in a helicopter, and he's just like, oh, I hope you don't die, but I'm gonna go with my boy anyway. So peace. I was just like, really? Okay, well, I guess his boy, like bros over hoes kind of thing. That was that was my impression of the beginning.
You bring up The Last of Us, and the reason The Last of Us opening, they obviously were trying to replicate it somewhat. But the reason The Last of Us opening worked is because you actually played as that girl walking around the house, just normal night. And there was a deep contrast between that and then, father comes in. passes out a little bit and then wakes up and all hell breaks loose. And obviously there's a bit more of an emotional reaction to a little girl getting shot, you know, and the father-daughter. With this, it just kind of opens in pure chaos, and there's just a woman who's been stabbed, and we don't know any of these characters yet, and it's kind of just like, what the fuck is going on?
Right. At least with The Last of Us, like there was some like cutesy dialogue between Joel and Sarah.
Yes.
And that like made you understand the dynamic of their relationship very, very quickly, which is why when she died very, very quickly, it just had so much of an impact.
Yeah, we were able to actually, like, it was a little bit of time, it was a brief period of time, but we were able to kind of see life before the storm, and get even just the smallest chance to care about these characters, and Days Gone doesn't really achieve that. Like, whatsoever. It opens up. It opens up, and we're they want us to care. They want us to see this as like a sad moment, and it just falls flat. And thank you for bringing up the Last of Us. I'm happy we talked about this a little bit. I'm happy I'm not the only one that kind of drew that comparison. I felt bad because for the first few hours I couldn't stop drawing that comparison. Eventually, I had to. Eventually I did stop, but it took a while. And it's not necessarily fair, but it's an obvious draw, especially if you're a PlayStation fan that has played that game. That game came out 6 years ago, and it set such a high standard of quality, and this in the first few hours just really struggled to reach that.
And I want to just clarify when I make that comparison, I'm really just talking about that opening, because overall, especially when you start getting towards the late middle, and especially the last third of the game, you begin to realize this isn't really a character-driven narrative. It's much more what's the word? It's almost a socio-political narrative. It's more about the world than it is the characters necessarily. Whereas obviously The Last of Us was much more intimate, much more character-focused, really on those main two protagonists.
Yeah.
I think this game does become more character-focused eventually. It just takes a little bit of time once we start to actually care about the characters that are presented to us. Not to mention the whole first act of the game doesn't really give us many characters that we're supposed to care about.
Right.
It's really that second act that gives us a crew that we grow to like.
I mean, to be frank, and we'll get into this as we go along, there was really only 2 characters throughout the entire game I really cared about. Maybe 3. And there's a lot of characters. A lot of characters.
Yeah.
All I'll say to conclude is I've been thinking about this parallel or allegory ever since I finished the game. This feels like reading Stephen King's It. As I was reading that novel, I just felt like I needed to be the editor, and I just needed to take a fucking axe to the book and, chop out shit like, yeah, you don't need to have things about, interdimensional gods and turtles and all the children having sex with each other in the sewer. Like,
oh my God.
I just feel like this game needed desperately an editor.
Spoilers for It Chapter 2 coming to theaters this summer.
Yeah.
Delaila,
they probably won't have the interdimensional turtle in there.
That will be a huge disappointment if they don't have the interdimensional turtle. But Delaila, is there something else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I do think that the game did try to be narrative focused, and I think that's why we're making the comparisons to The Last of Us, because I mean, even Uncharted, like Naughty Dog just does such a great job at making you care about characters very quickly. Like I'm thinking about in The Last of Us, like how quickly like I liked Tess, or how quickly I liked the father and the son. Oh my God, I forget their names, like Marvin or something. I don't know. No,
Yeah,
that's actually Resident Evil 2. Never mind.
I actually can't remember their names either. Now that I think about it.
No, but like the point is that every single character in that game I cared about and quickly. Like it didn't take 5 chapters for me to start caring about them. Whereas in this game, like for example, Boozer, who's one of the characters that I actually like, it took me a few chapters to be like, oh, okay, I kind of like this guy. I kind of care about him. I kind of understand the relationship between him and Deacon. And I just think that's because Naughty Dog just mastered that kind of thing, so it isn't really fair to make that comparison. But if you're having a Sony exclusive narrative driven game, it's kind of inevitable that those comparisons come into play.
And it's also kind of funny when you consider Sony Bend, because the last game that they made, the last major game that they made before Days Gone, was an Uncharted game. It was Golden Abyss for the Vita.
Oh, right. Yeah,
Yeah. That's something I
that's-
meant to bring up about them when we first mentioned the developer.
I
I'm sure
never
that
played
was I'm sure that was in collaboration though, right?
I mean,
it had to have been
I'm
writers from
sure
Naughty
they,
Dog.
they had to make sure they kept consistent with that game's universe, even if there are some weird things that happened in it that are weird to think about in the overall.
I never played it, so I'm not really too
Well,
caught up on that.
That's fine.
Yeah.
But still, they do have some experience with, like, I guess, good narratives or adding to a good narrative in that capacity. And just to bring it full circle, we're talking a lot about comparing to a Naughty Dog game. I thought I'd throw that out there.
Yeah. And I was looking back on the games that Days Gone made before. I mean, that Sony Bend made before Days Gone. And like this is really like a big leap for them, regardless,
Which is great. I'm really happy that they're now back to making big first party games for Sony. I don't think they've really done that since Siphon Filter, but I could be wrong.
Siphon Filter.
Yeah, I had to bring that up just for you, Jason. Sorry.
Oh, I remember playing that game with my cousins, split screen multiplayer. You could tase each other to death. Literally, you would light on fire. Oh, great times.
So anyway, do we want to move on into the main meat of the game?
Yes.
Main meat of meat and bones.
So Delaila just mentioned Boozer.
Yeah, and I want to preface before we go in the way that we're changing up the format again, just a little bit. Since this game focuses so heavily on storylines, which we'll get into, character interactions between Deacon and so, I figured what we would do is kind of delve into those interactions one by one with like important figures, not like every single one that you have in the game. There are certain characters that I feel are pretty forgettable and unnecessary to really talk about.
Especially because it's not really linear. Like you could approach this in many different ways.
Well, that's kind of the thing. Is it's not really linear, but it is really linear. The way that the missions unlock makes it so linear, but the way that they present them to you is not. It's such a boggling idea. Yeah, it's a.
I had periods of time where I wouldn't have any story progressing missions open to me. I would just have like maybe a side bounty or something like it. And I would just roam around like, what the fuck am I supposed to do next?
I mean, and that has happened in other games. I mean, take Spider-Man. There would be times, not that we're going to spoil Spider-Man entirely, just to bring up this one thing. There'd be times where you wouldn't have your next mission yet, and you would just be expected to, swing around the city, stop a crime, and then the next mission would unlock. This is sort of the same way, but it's the way that it all progresses and the way that the missions are presented to you. It's a really, and in my opinion, it's a really good idea with a really, really terrible presentation or attempt at pulling it off.
Its formatting of completing missions reminded me of life. Like I'm having my experience with like you guys right now, right? And then like in a few minutes I'm going to go have an experience with my cat and then my boyfriend, and it's like very fragmented, right? So it's not like this like linear experience where I'm like fleshing out the story between us three and then fleshing out the story between the cat. Like life is very dynamic like that, but I feel like in a video game having those like fragmented stories mixed together just doesn't work.
Right. And I totally agree. And the way that it's presented to you is the way it's presented to you is like you have storylines, you have a percentage with those storylines, and to me that cries out like, oh, I really care about this storyline, so I'm gonna go and progress that one, and I'll worry about the other ones later. But that's not how the game works. It's still a linear progression where, no, you're gonna get this mission whether you like it or not. I don't care if you like the storyline or not. This is the next mission in the story, so it
Right.
defeats the purpose of having those storylines.
Yeah.
By the way, Delilah, I'm curious. What percentage are you with your storyline with your cat? Just wondering.
90,
Oh,
98%.
oh, that's great. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So, like Jason was saying, the first character we really need to talk about, the first real character that we have like true interactions with in the game, that'd be Boozer.
Mhm.
Yes, and he's definitely the best character.
Yes, you lend him a
I,
hand like more than once in that game, I should say.
yes, um, definitely. You wrote here in the notes one of the characters with a better arc. I would argue he's the only character with an arc. Um,
Okay.
and
I
he's
agree.
by the end of the game, he was really the only as all of the end action is taking place. He was the only character I actually really cared about what happened to him. And at the end of the game, there and obviously this is reap the spoils, so spoiler alert. At the end of the game, there are a few
Oh,
minutes where
it's expected that anyone listening
yeah,
to this knows that we're about to spoil everything.
at the end of
Yeah.
the game, in the final battle, there's a few minutes where you think he's dead, that he sacrificed himself, and I
Mhm.
actually was like, "Fuck!" Like I didn't
Yeah.
want him to die. Like I would rather Deacon died, and you know, no, seriously,
No,
like.
I agree. That's why I'm laughing. It's just funny.
And when it turned out that he didn't die, and then he was just kind of fucking around with it, I was like, "Oh man!" And that was really the only point at which I actually that's not completely true. There was one other point where I actually kind of felt something, but that was really the only point I kind of felt anything for a character.
Where I kind of felt something. It's just so
But
I
emotionless in this whole
I think a lot
experience.
I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it wasn't necessarily due to good writing so much as he's the first character you're with. He's with you throughout the entirety of the game. There's more time to develop him, um, and you just grow more attached because so much of what you're doing has to do with him and his well-being and your relationship with him.
Right. And so this is like your biker dude brother, and so he's injured and he can't go off on missions with you, and he's like tight about it that you're going and doing all these things, and he's freaking stuck on a bed, like pretty much bedridden, can't do anything, and the illness starts to get to him and he goes a little crazy, and like you guys have like a lot of bumping head moments. They actually get into a physical altercation, and then you're like, fuck, like what's gonna happen? Are they gonna kill each other? Like you're really questioning like their bromance, so to speak. And then eventually, like Boozer's just like he gets better. He's like, you know what, fuck it, dude. Deacon's like, fuck it, dude. We're gonna get on this bike and we're gonna take a ride. I'm gonna take you with me. You're gonna get off this bed. And like that moment for me was just like, wow, like that all he wanted to do was get out of his bed. And it sounds so simple on paper, but if you're playing the game, it really speaks to their relationship and why it's the best relationship in that game.
Yeah. How painful was it to watch that the scene the scene that caused the injury, the Ripper with the blowtorch. I don't know. I
Yeah,
cringed throughout the entire time. That
that was
was
fucked up.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was fucked up. Which to just start talking about the world that we're in a little bit, like that, it really helps to paint a picture really early on. Not only just the freakers running around, because I don't want to say anybody can make a zombie game, but anyone can make a zombie game. It doesn't really take much. Oh, I'm sorry, but these technically aren't zombies. They're freakers.
They're
It's
zombies.
not the same thing. Um, but what's more interesting in a zombie game isn't the zombies, but the people that are inhabiting that world and getting introduced to the Rippers like that. And causing like a major ripple in what we're going to see throughout the entire game. Like it was a good way to I would say it's a good way to start off the world building a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You hit it right on the head. You hit the nail right on the head.
Ah,
Any post-apocalyptic / zombie story is supposed to be at least about the human interactions and how humanity deals with it.
Mhm.
Um, it's like Fallout. Nobody cares really how we got here. It's what happens afterwards.
right, right. So, um, I kept expecting when he got his arm amputated, because we talked about it. He started getting sick. He had blood poisoning, and Deacon wound up taking Boozer down to Lost Lake Camp. He got his arm amputated. I kept expecting him to like lose his shit on Deacon every time Deacon was like, "I'm gonna go get his bike to make him feel better. I'm gonna get him this knife attachment for his arm. He'll love that." I don't know. I kept expecting Boozer to just lose his goddamn mind on
Right.
I
Deacon.
did too, and I think
Yeah.
that's what made him so interesting.
Yeah, like he never really did.
Mm.
No, he got a fucking puppy.
Oh my god, yeah. I love the puppy. Oh, that was another thing. Before the puppy, there was like the. I'm happy that the puppy happened because earlier, like I gotta talk about. I forgot about this until just now. A couple missions before that, you take him out on a run, and there's like some rabid dogs and whatnot, and he starts killing all of them. And there was one that like he wound up having to kill that was totally okay. And I was really hoping and expecting that dog to become his buddy, and he wound up having to kill him, and I got really upset about that. So I just want to say I'm really thankful for the puppy.
Yeah,
Just,
me too.
thank you, Sony Bend, for the puppy. That made everything better. Um, and last thing I just want to bring up, like to go back to the whole death thing at the end where he sacrifices himself. What a trope.
Yeah.
Just what a boring trope. Because you find out like 5 minutes later that he's not dead. It's
Right.
just I don't know. I feel like we didn't have any time to grieve, and that felt less impact. I love Boozer. He was probably my favorite supporting character. But that did nothing for me. Like we found out 5 minutes later. I don't know. I had no time to really grieve, and therefore had no time to really think that was a good move. But
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was impacted as soon as it happened, but you're right. But we pretty quickly realized, like, oh shit, he's fine.
yeah,
And it was like, oh, okay, all right, cool, moving on.
exactly. And then the ending happens. It's like, oh, okay. So it's all done.
Yeah. So moving on.
Yeah, we've got more character interactions. These two characters, especially one of them.
You know what? This is going to take 30 seconds, and I'm just going to definitively lay out. So the first two camps, and just to clarify, the camps, quote unquote, are essentially hub areas within the open world where you can, refuel your bike, buy new weapons, get missions, shit like that. And each camp kind of has their head honchos that are supporting part of the members of the supporting cast, along with any other people you might interact with. The first two camps are headed by two characters, Copeland and Tucker, who, again, going back to my Stephen King analogy, these camps did not belong in the game. You could have just cut them both out completely.
They're like introductory camps. Like the way I see the game is there's 3 acts to it. There's the whole beginning part before you go to Lost Lake Camp. The second act is Lost Lake Camp, and then the third act is when you go south.
But that's what I'm saying. It doesn't even make sense to have the first act be about these camps.
I don't know.
Because once you leave them, you never need to go back, and they're never relevant to the story.
Yeah, and that is a thing that I noticed. And
I think you should have just started at Lost Lake Camp.
No,
Then go to the other camp, and then actually build up, and because eventually it becomes a conflict between Lost Lake Camp and the militia, and there was almost no build up to that. There needed to be more time on a build up to that conflict, maybe why there's the conflict, the socio-political elements behind it, the philosophy, because you do see that in conversations between Deacon and Iron Mike, those philosophical differences, and I wish those were explored more, maybe to make Deacon a more interesting character. I don't know, but we're talking about Copeland and Tucker right now, the leaders of the first two camps, and they really contribute absolutely nothing to the story or the game.
I don't agree because they work well from an exposition standpoint to introduce us again to introduce us to the world, to introduce us to some of the characters that are in the major and players that are in this destroyed state of Oregon. Not to mention, it's important to introduce us to Copeland, who is this game's Alex Jones.
Yeah.
Super right-wing nut job coming on the radio talking about your Second Amendment rights in a place that basically has no government anymore. That's kind of how I view these two camps. Not to mention the Tucker camp introduced us to another kind of unfortunately short-lived character that had somewhat of a promising story arc, Lisa.
Mm.
Yeah, I was kind of like, did they have more planned for this character and then realize it would probably make this game look too much like The Last of Us, so they
Right.
just chopped it a lot out?
I mean, I think it's important. I think it was a good idea and important to explore like a child, or you know, she's ostensibly a child that's living in a world like this all on her own. She's got no one left. It's important to explore a character like that. But
And
eventually,
she does come back throughout the game.
yeah, but she's mostly an afterthought. Like there's a really heavy emphasis on her in that first act, and then she comes back, having been assimilated into the Rippers at some point, and she like
Who are this cult-like group that are kind of a external faction
yeah,
that worship the Freakers.
Yeah.
and she like helps you there, and then she doesn't show up until after you've beaten the main portion of the game, where she shows up at Lost Lake. It's like, I'm not staying, and they kind of have a father-daughter bonding moment, and that's it. And I don't know, it's she was an interesting character, and it's kind of disappointing to see her get the shaft like that.
Yeah, it was funny. At one point in the game, I almost forgot about her when we had to do other missions, and I was just like, "Wait, what the hell happened to Lisa? What? I didn't even remember her name. I was like, what happened to that little girl?" And then she showed up like way later in the game. I was like, "Oh shit, that's her!" Like with her hair shaved and like cuts all over her face. I was like, "Oh, that's really cool." But then after like you rescued her, she rescued you, and you guys left the Ripper camp. Everything was just like, okay, happy ending. But I do agree with you, Jason. Like, I feel like your connection to characters didn't really establish themselves until you got to Lost Lake. Like, I felt like Copeland and Tucker were not too memorable, and even the people in that camp, except Manny, who was like hooking up my ride. But you know, that's all he was good for. But like eventually, like I didn't start feeling connected till I met Ricky and some of the other people at Lost Lake camp.
To that extent, I will agree. I mostly just think these camps were important to set an exposition.
Because
And also, Copeland
ultimately,
is just batshit crazy.
Yeah.
because ultimately in this narrative, you got two main, in terms of character development. Well, I wouldn't even say you got two main themes going on. You got Deacon looking for his wife, which isn't really a theme. It's just kind of a plot device to get you going from place to place. And then you got the other theme, which is the development of Deacon. You know, he starts out the game kind of this I wouldn't say nihilist, just cynical. He believes that he sees the world, quote unquote, as it is, and you have this character Iron Mike, who we'll talk about in a minute or two, who believes that people should be trying to make the world a better place, and Deacon's development over time to eventually become the leader of Lost Lake Camp. You know, he goes from being that cynical person to, I wouldn't say as hopeful as Iron Mike, just a less cynical person who believes, yeah, maybe I can help to make this world somewhat better.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're talking a lot about Lost Lake. Why don't we move on to Lost Lake?
Yeah.
I kind of combined there's a lot of players in Lost Lake, so I kind of just want to combine them all into like one, grouping. We have Ricky, who she used to ride with Boozer and Deacon, and we don't that doesn't really get explored too much.
Well, Boozer and Deacon apparently used to hang out at Lost Lake, and then they got booted out.
Yeah, I guess that's how it would have come to be. I guess when they were
they
there,
did,
she rode with them.
yeah, she did. They did something, and then Iron Mike like banished them, and that's like one of the first things when you get there. You kind of have to okay it with Iron Mike.
Yeah, and you do so by. How did you guys? Real quick aside, but how did you guys feel about Days Gone's sneaking mechanics and stealth mechanics, I should say?
They were good. I actually used stealth quite a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
I felt they were the most fun when dealing with the freakers in terms of just raw gameplay.
Right.
When
Thank you.
dealing with human beings, it fucking sucked.
Specifically the Nero missions, like where you
Yes.
can't stealth kill them, you're kind of just stealthing around. That sucked, and you had to do that over and over again. So, thank you. I would have forgotten about that.
And I'm not even just talking about the Nero missions, like camps, like when you go in bandit camps, or like when you're dealing with like fighting the militia, like all that shit.
And what kind of going back to what Delilah's talking about with the Nero missions, the shitty excuse of they're really heavily armored, they're wearing hazmat suits. You can't stab a hazmat suit. It's like, okay, all right.
Didn't you hear they had Terminator armor?
Like what a lore reason.
They're evolving, Mark.
Yeah, we'll get to that later. But Lost Lake, you have Ricky, who I really liked. I really liked her arc.
I liked all the characters at Lost Lake.
There was one bit with Ricky that I thought was really weird and dumb, but we'll talk about that momentarily. I want to introduce all the characters here. We have Addie, who is...
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you probably know what I'm talking about. But we have Addie, who's the doctor of Lost Lake Camp.
She's actually a veterinarian, technically.
Yeah, but I liked her. I thought she was cool. Iron Mike, who we all know and love. He's a
Who was the other character aside from Boozer who I think I really cared about? When he died, I felt like that was kind of a moment, even though the animation of him dying kind of looked weird. So I almost chuckled, but
he dies during the invasion of the militia later in the game. He gets shot and he's bedridden and dies on the bed. That was a really well done death.
Yeah.
It was very impactful, very emotional. I was impressed.
Yeah.
And then our last major player from Lost Lake, fucking Schizo.
Schizo, the dick.
What a little bitch.
I hate that guy. We'll get to Schizo later. For now, I do want to kind of delve into this thing with Ricky.
Yeah, so what bothered you?
So, I mean, it was pretty well established early on that Ricky and Addie were lovers.
Right.
And, I liked that. They worked really well as characters together. They had good interactions. Her and Deacon started going on more missions together, doing things. They got the electricity up and running, spent a lot of time talking, bonding, back in that, kind of reconnecting. And that was the whole point of her storyline, was to reconnect and rekindle that friendship.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, Deacon's injured, and she's treating his wounds, and she gets a little...
Frisky.
Tries to get a little frisky, a little intimate.
Well, to be fair, I think they were trying to imply that at that moment in time, Ricky and Addie had some sort of beef, even though it's never really explained what it is.
Sure.
But regardless, none of it was really necessary to the story, and I agree with you. It kind of distracts
And all it really did was introduce that whole line of lighting a candle that Ricky said like no less than 10 times from that point on to the end of the game. As if it was like their secret code word or
Right.
something.
Right.
And at the end of that scene, we also see I kind of missed it. I want to say it was Schizo at the door, like saw what happened. Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
I don't.
I swear that somebody was at the door and saw them almost get jiggy with it. And
I didn't see that.
all right, maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe I'm seeing things. Maybe it took me so long to play through this game that I started hallucinating scenes.
No, honestly, once I started seeing them kind of getting close, I was like, I skipped it. Because
Okay.
it just pissed me off because I felt like that wasn't the dynamic of the relationship I wanted to explore in this game between Deacon and Ricky.
Yeah.
Like the friendship was fine and them going a little deeper than that like weirded me out. Like, dude, like you're spending this whole time looking for your wife and like
Right,
was
she
in a
knows-
relationship.
And
She knows full well like that he's looking for his wife. It's kind of weird.
And two
Yeah.
deacons credit, like he did stop it.
Right.
And
No,
s-
yeah,
and
totally.
say,
But
Look, no, this isn't happening. Like so,
it's just
he
strange.
yeah, it was an odd moment and one that I just didn't really care for.
No.
But overall, I really liked Ricky as a character. I thought she was a really strong, really determined, and a character that I did come to care about quite a lot.
Yeah, she had this balance between like badass and kind of motherly a little bit, at least in the way that she was nurturing Lisa when she first met her and realized that she had been abducted by the Rippers and probably like raped or who knows. Like they didn't make that explicit, but it's sort of implied that that's what they do. And I thought she was being really nurturing to her in that moment, but she's still like a badass,
Yeah.
which is a nice balance.
And I've said all I really want to say about Addie. I really liked Addie as a character, although she didn't have a particularly good or impactful arc throughout the game.
Yeah, for me, Ricky and Addie, they didn't really have none of the characters, not even Schizo didn't either. None of them really had arcs. They were kind of so from if you're looking at it from, and these are some of my creative writing 101 courses from college coming back
Oh
up.
boy, I'm so
When you're-
glad
when
we
you're
get to
looking
get-
at
we
these-
get to learn something.
When you're looking at these characters, Iron Mike is definitely the mentor stereotype. He's
Yeah.
Gandalf, Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I guess that's why I liked him so much is because I tend to like the mentor characters in stories. So I don't know, maybe that's just a personal bias. But yeah, Ricky and Addie are definitely more supposed to be kind of the moral compass. When Deacon is kind of like, oh, fuck it. Oh, doing his cynical shit, just being an asshole. They're the ones who try to steer him towards. I mean, that's really what Ricky is trying to do throughout the entire game is getting him to stay at Lost Lake Camp and, become a part of the community.
Mm-hmm.
Which of course he eventually does towards the end. And Schizo is like weird because he's obviously towards the end. I don't even remember when exactly it is, but he betrays you. What is that? Towards the end of Act 2,
Yeah, that was
approximately.
I would say probably maybe halfway through Act 2, or maybe just past the halfway point.
And they try to make him an antagonist, and he doesn't feel like an antagonist. He just feels like an asshole that you want to kill.
And that's something else that I want to bring up. First of all, before we move on to that point, I started to like Schizo. I've never felt so betrayed. As soon as I started liking him.
Yeah.
That's true.
As soon as I started liking him, he sells you out, man.
They did execute that well, but it wasn't really so much the character as much as like I was like, oh, maybe this guy ain't so bad, and then they perfectly executed the betrayal right there.
Completely duped you. It was really well done, and that winds up. He sells you out to the Rippers, and we've been hearing his name a lot, but we didn't really know much about him until this moment when you get trapped in the Ripper camp. Carlos, the leader of the Rippers.
And I don't even remember what his real name
His
is. He
name
was a
was Jesse.
Jesse. Yeah, he was a member of the MC with you
Mm-hmm.
and Boozer.
And
And
I feel like I when we got introduced to that, like that whole idea that hey, this isn't Carlos, this is Jesse. I felt like I was missing something.
yeah, me too.
Mm-hmm.
Like as we were just talking about something that was really well executed with an antagonist, this was not. In
It
my
was
opinion.
confusing. I thought I had accidentally skipped the the cutscene beforehand. Like I thought, because I was watching it and I saw like Jesse, and then I was like, "What the fuck is going on?" And the only reason I didn't know, like I was for sure, I knew that I didn't skip it was because I accidentally died, and then had to go and watch it
Mm.
again. And
Yeah.
I was like, what's going on?
I think
And
that's because we had no idea who Jesse was, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
it
they
was.
start introducing the name Jesse, and they don't really give us a good explanation. I feel like the first point you get, like a good explanation of who he was, is if you do the optional mission to go to Sarah's gravestone, where Deacon just kind of talks to it and gives like a little bit of backstory or whatever to whatever events are going on, and he
Mm.
describes that part. He describes, back in the past, him and Boozer and the leader of the MC. What was his name again? Do either
I
of you
don't,
remember?
I don't remember.
Mm-mm.
Another concerning thing is how forgettable a lot of these people's names are.
Yeah.
But the two
Well,
of
I feel like
them,
it's because we never actually see the aside from
Right.
Jesse
that's
when he talks about the MC, we get a lot of names from the MC and like stories, but we never actually see flashbacks of
yeah, and
any
that
of them.
would have been nice to see. Is we got plenty of flashbacks, but nothing with the MC. That would have been nice to see, like some
I
MC
feel like that would have
flashbacks.
been a better opening than what we got.
Yeah,
Was to get like his everyday life, at the MC, wherever their main hub is, hanging out and then going to maybe riding to go see Sarah, or I'm sorry, yeah, Sarah.
no, you got her name right.
I thought I was talking about Lisa, but I was talking about Sarah. Um, and then maybe you have to ride out, and it's kind of a little tutorial how to ride your motorcycle to go see Sarah. And as you're riding out to go see Sarah with Boozer, all hell breaks loose. You know what I'm saying?
No,
Like,
I
Yeah.
agree.
I would have been more interested in seeing flashbacks of the gang, of the biker gang, instead of all the
right?
flashbacks with Sarah.
Yeah, like anything
Yeah,
anything involving that MC would have just been really welcome because any flashback we got always involved Sarah, which I get it. They really wanted to hammer home the whole Deacon Sarah relationship, which we will talk about. We're getting there. Um,
Mhm.
they really wanted to hammer that home, but Deacon had this whole other life as part of this MC, and we really saw nothing of it. And he
yeah.
describes this.
It didn't have any influence really on the story at the end of the day.
Yeah, and he describes this situation where him, Boozer, and the leader of the MC, whose again name escapes us, but they held Jesse down and I think burned off his tattoo on his back.
Yes,
Yeah.
they actually took that from
Sons of Anarchy.
there's an episode again going back to Sons of Anarchy. There's so when you're booted out of the MC, you're supposed to get the tattoo of the club removed, blacked out when you get booted out for anything. So obviously then I didn't ever picked up on that. Maybe I didn't do that mission to Sarah's gravesite,
It's possible.
but
Hmm.
then Jesse would have been kicked out of the MC because there's an episode in Sons of Anarchy where they catch a guy they kicked out of the MC and they see accidentally he still has his tat. So they give him the option flame or knife. And obviously he chooses flame, so there's just a scene of them burning the tattoo off his back.
Jeez. So that kind of spirals Jesse into becoming this cult leader during this apocalypse, and I guess it partly kind of helps explain like the Rippers and their
Burning
yeah,
the tattoos, yeah. That actually a lot more makes now that you brought that up, a lot more makes sense now with the Rippers.
yeah. And the whole thing with the Rippers is they are a cult that follow the Freakers, and they want to live and be like the Freaks. Um, we eventually Boozer and Deacon blow up a what was it, a dam to flood the territory where the Rippers were in, and they go and confront Jesse, and Deacon winds up killing him. Pretty much halfway through the game, it's a very underdeveloped.
Yeah, and now that I know the background, that actually could have been a good antagonist. Like someone who actually has a clear motive and is now even further fucked up by the situation that everybody finds themselves
Well,
in.
he was totally built up as if he was the main antagonist of the game. It's this mysterious figure that we know nothing about. And for the majority of the game, and his name is only brought up, and no one really knows anything about him. No one's seen him, but they know that he hates the biker
Yeah.
boys.
It's talked about kind of passively how Iron Mike has a treaty with Carlos to keep the Rippers away from Lost Lake Camp, and that they wouldn't cross into Ripper territory and break the treaty. And I agree. And again, this is why I say, in terms of you were talking about the 3-act structure, they really should have just cut out, I feel, almost all of that entirely and just focused on what made up the latter half of the game, which was Lost Lake Camp and the militia.
Yeah, and another thing I'm kind of disappointed we never saw. I mean, I kind of get it, but I want to see anyone try to negotiate with the Rippers. Like, how do you negotiate with a bunch of crazy assholes that are high on PCP
Yeah.
and like
And who knows what else?
yeah, like I don't know how that works, but I digress. I think the Rippers and Carlos were very underdeveloped, underutilized, and short-lived antagonist.
Yes.
Delilah, do you have anything you want to add before we move on to the militia?
Yeah, so I agree with everything you guys said about the Rippers, and him as an antagonist being underdeveloped, but I do think that's because the real true like overarching antagonist is really the government in a way, or we'll get into it later a little more, but he's just kind of like a micro antagonist, and I think there's like a bigger picture which we probably won't see until Days Gone 2.
Yeah.
You've been
Or
been
Eve.
listening to too much info wars there. Government is the enemy. Come on, Delilah.
No. In this case, I'd be listening to too much Radio Free Oregon.
Yes.
Yeah. But all right, so after you get back from the Ripper, killing Carlos and whatever the hell, and Iron Make is kind of pissed or whatever. He wants you to go, and you want to go anyway because you get a lead. Deacon gets a lead that Sarah might be alive, which also, God, that was another thing that really annoyed the shit out of me. Was he finally came to this acceptance. She's not alive. I can move on.
Yeah, we barely even talked about this. That
There's a reason for that, because that's like the biggest one that I really want to save that for last, because it encompasses pretty much top to bottom the entire game. But what leads you down further south from Lost Lake is this lead that you get that, oh wait, she's actually alive. But before that, a few missions before that, you finally come to accept that she's gone.
Yeah.
It's another instance where you're just given no time to grieve and accept the situation, because in no time you're led the other way again.
But plot twist, no, she's not, and you got to go on, and that's why I say your wife Sarah is not. I don't even feel like she's a character. I feel like she's a plot device just to get you from
Agreed.
point A to B to C. So sexist.
Before we get to Sarah, I do want to talk a little bit about the militia, because you go down south, and it's much more snowy down there.
Mm-hmm.
which is a nice change of pace. And I do kind of want to add to that. They really did a good job of like changing up the locales, even though it takes place entirely in Oregon.
Hmm.
There's
Yeah.
Oregon. I didn't know Oregon had so many different biomes that were so segregated.
Yeah, you go through mountains, through valleys, forests. It's pretty.
Deserts, snowy landscapes, lakes, marshlands. It's everywhere in Oregon. Didn't know that it was that diverse in its environments. Um, but you go down there and you get introduced to this militia, the Deschute. Deschute? Is it Deschute?
I don't know.
I mean, I have it. The whole thing is I have it written down here, but I can't remember how they pronounce it. It's the militia, the Deschute County Militia.
Yeah.
Very, very drastic, crazy change in tone. Given that you're introduced to military ranks and you find out, and this was also an interesting opportunity to learn more about Deacon because we learn a
Yeah.
lot about his time spent in the military.
Yep.
Right.
I
Which
really.
Which, and I'm sorry, I might be jumping ahead a bit
You're
here.
okay.
But you're in kind of your first introduction to a main character in this sphere of the game is, I believe he was a captain, Captain Curry.
Yes, he was Captain Curry.
And you kind of have you develop in a very short period of time a pretty good rapport with him. Kind of going back and forth, sharing, your stories, your backgrounds as both real veterans from real wars. And Curry could have been one of like my third character that I actually cared about, and I guess we'll get to it in a little bit. But he kind of, after your introduction to the militia, he's kind of just not there.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's just mysterious because you see that the ring you gave Sarah was on his finger, and
Right.
you're kind of like, what happened there? Did she marry him?
Yeah, that was
like,
like my first thought too. Is like, did they get post-apocalypse married?
Right.
Are we gonna find out that she took another lover? Like, what's going
Yeah.
on? Or did he like have to kill her and take the ring or something? Like,
Yeah, and he was like real inquisitive about Deacon's life, like, oh, were you married? Like, who were you married to? And asking all these questions, and Deacon was kind of vague and whatever. So, you saw the interest between them, but also like, what was this connection to Sarah? And that's what kind of kept it mysterious, even though we didn't really see him until much later in the game.
Yeah.
After first being introduced to him.
and the reason that he had the ring was kind of just a throwaway reason that I don't know.
Yeah, when you find out that when you're inducted into the militia, which you do pretty shortly after getting there, you have to give up all your possessions, and all you're really wearing at that point is your ring, because you leave your MC cut behind with Boozer when you leave Lost Lake Camp. And you're also introduced to the Colonel, who at first glance, obviously he's a pretty hard-ass guy, but I kind of thought he was going to be a more nuanced character, because you have this whole arc thing where he's trying to collect technology and artifacts and trying to set up so that maybe we could rebuild human civilization in the wake of the Freakers. And I was like, oh, all right, so there's definitely some bad shit here, but
let's also not forget that a lot of that was built on religion.
Right. That's where I'm going, is that I thought, okay, maybe we're going to get a more nuanced character here. Like, I definitely knew he was going to be a bad guy, but maybe there would be some nuance. And then, of course, they went straight up, crazy religious zealot, which I didn't like, mostly because it was kind of, again, cliche.
Sure, I do feel that the game the game didn't really explore religion much up until that point. And
well, the Rippers.
If we could look at the Rippers and that they worship the freaks, but that the freaks exist, and they're not to say that if you have religious
no,
beliefs,
I understand. Yeah,
But the freaks are tangible and right in front of you, and they want to be like them. So it's the difference of idolizing something and believing in something, and we don't really have much exploration of beliefs in the game until that point. And I think it was I personally think it was a good angle. Their concept of an arc and the Colonel's concept of an arc was pretty interesting and different.
yeah. Like in isolation, it's a pretty noble thing, but where it goes,
Yeah,
kind of. And I mean, by the end of it, it kind of becomes irrelevant anyway.
yeah,
The whole arc, like, and ultimately the Colonel himself, it kind of all becomes irrelevant.
right.
Yeah, that's the point. Like Schizo as an antagonist, what was his name? Jesse, and even this Colonel guy, like all of them had like kind of interesting buildups, but then once their arc, so to speak, was over, it was just kind of like, all right, like there
Cool,
was really nothing long lasting. Yeah, cool.
cool story.
Exactly.
War. Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah. Um. So shortly after getting introduced to the militia and Captain Corey, the Colonel, uh, there are other interesting characters within
yes.
the militia.
The scientist dude.
The scientist dude was pretty cool. I really liked the doctor, and they totally fucking snubbed him.
Right.
And it was all because of that fucking druggy kid. I can't even. Oh, Taylor. His
Hmm.
name was Taylor, and he sucked.
Yeah.
I did
Yeah.
not like him one bit. Uh, I really liked the doctor. I liked the other scientist dude. Not a big fan of the scientist girl.
AKA your wife,
Yeah,
Sarah.
Nice
yeah,
segue.
yeah, right.
I agree. When you first meet her, well, not when you first meet her, but when you're reunited with her, when Deacon's reunited with her, her reaction, I was like,
to
there
give
almost is no reaction.
to give them
It's
some
so
credit,
weird.
like
I thought she didn't recognize you at first. Like,
or what my first instinct was, so that they get reintroduced, and the Deacon's already been lying his way into this militia, uh, claiming he had a wife of a different name, and he didn't have a picture of her, um, that he came from a different area, not Lost Lake, yada yada. He lied his way into this camp, and he's obviously trying to keep it under. He's trying to keep everything undercover. He's trying to keep his status there undercover. So of course he's not gonna want to blurt out Sarah and then go give her a hug. I get that.
yeah,
And her reaction was pretty much. It made me think that she, not that she didn't recognize him, that she like got bonked on the head really hard and had amnesia or something.
Right.
yeah.
And then when they were alone, like they were alone shortly after that, and I expected a lot more.
Right. Me too.
Not even just a lot more of like interaction or something, just a lot more like anything.
Like getting jiggy with it on the
No,
table.
not even that. Just like she was in denial of him being there. She said, "You're dead. You're supposed to be dead." And like,
Yeah, I thought that meant like she had done something like maybe, I don't know, Bones the curry dude. Like,
oh my god. Yeah, well, I mean, that was still a thought in my mind by that point too, because we still had no idea why he had that ring.
yeah, they definitely implied it like well, not implied it that specifically, but they kept cutting back. The few times we see Curry, it always focuses on him looking at Deacon and Sarah, and he's got the ring on, and it focuses on like, and it never really explains why.
That might have been an intentional bait and switch. He did at one point inform Deacon, like, hey, uh, don't get too chummy. All right, you're still she still outranks you or whatever. It's not you know what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
he did bring that up, but I don't know. Like, the burn to them rekindling their relationship was very. it was really slow and nonsensical, and then suddenly it just made this massive leap to, okay, it's sensical again
Yes.
without any logical buildup.
Yes. It felt like they were trying to pad out just to make that section of the game longer so they could also do other stuff.
Yeah.
Even before that, I was not convinced of their relationship. Like, I think the most quote unquote romantic moment that they had is when he brought her to like this like beautiful waterfall area and proposed to her, and then they laid down and she got a phone call. She was like, "Oh shit, I gotta go back to work." And I'm
Yeah.
like, "Yo, bitch, like fucking take a day off. Like, don't answer the phone. Like, he's just like did something really sweet for you." And
Well,
she just
when
never seemed like she cared about him, and he seemed like he cared about her, but I never understood why. I was like, "What do you see in her?"
when he took her to the weed farm.
Yeah.
To be fair, like I was kind of convinced in their relationship. Like they did at times convince me, but it still didn't really make much sense.
Mm.
It wasn't like the most sensical relationship. Like it could be convincing at times, but it didn't make any much more sense.
Yeah,
And
like the flashback where they actually like at the actual wedding where only Boozer showed up and he's just chilling in the back. Like
Yes.
I thought that was a really good moment.
I did too.
Yes. But it was a moment for Boozer and Deacon, right? Again, like
Well,
their
sh-
No,
relationship.
even
She
the
also
wedding I
has that.
thought was like
Yeah,
between the two of them.
and she has that thing where she says, ride me harder than you ride your bike or something like that,
Well, a bunch of
which she said she wouldn't say
a bunch of
earlier,
people on
and
Twitter got really pissy and mad about that line. Apparently,
you know, fuck,
that's a really
fuck,
common biker vow.
yeah, fuck me, fuck Twitter. That's why I'm not on Twitter. I don't give a fuck.
But the other point I want to bring up is Delilah. She couldn't take a day off because she had really important work to do, like
Right.
destroying the world.
Yes. Which became extremely predictable at a certain point for me.
Oh yeah.
I did I not tell you guys when I like literally when I was like a couple hours into the game on our chat on Slack, I put in there like I already predict that she is partially responsible for this.
I don't know. I'm not gonna check the transcripts on that one, but
I predicted that like way in advance.
Well,
Like
sorry.
No,
I think
you
before.
did. I remember that, but I had beat in the game at that point. I was like, I'm not
Yeah.
gonna say anything.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
sorry, Jason. Just because you made that prediction and got it right doesn't mean you get a point. Anyway, yeah. I don't know. I eventually came to like Sarah as a character, not nearly as much as like Ricky or Boozer or anything, but like she did have her moments. Overall, though,
Yeah.
like the flashbacks convinced me, but none of the present day moments with between her and Deacon really did.
I almost wish that Sarah had died, and you find that out when you get to the militia. I feel like that almost would have made um, Deacon's arc, quote unquote, of becoming part of the community at Lost Lake Camp almost have more meaning
Yeah,
because it's like everybody else at Lost Lake Camp who are now part of that community, replacing the families that they've lost. He would. You know what I'm saying? Like,
no, absolutely, and like,
or even if, sorry,
go
or
ahead.
even if she actually intentionally knew what she was contributing to this apocalypse and still did it anyway, whereas she was
yes,
just kind of like a tool in it. If she would have like been like, oh, you guys are like making this like really disgusting substance that can change people, fuck it, go ahead. Like children are impacted, adults, it doesn't matter, and like kind of went with it. I feel like that would have made her a darker character, and then like see the turmoil between her and Deacon and Boozer, like, oh, you're a fucking scummy bitch, whatever. Like I guess it would have been more dramatic, and less like happy ending kind of feel. And I don't care for her, so I wanted her to be a bitch so that I could like her a little more.
Boozer just mows her down with his truck at the end of the
Oh
game.
my god.
Yeah, yeah, I would have been down.
But yeah, I don't know. She had her moment, and I will say I did like the ending. Um, it was cheesy. It was happy
It
go lucky,
was.
but I enjoyed it. Sometimes I enjoy that kind of thing, you know. For such a bleak
But
game, it was a surprising ending, but I liked
but
it.
which ending?
Well, okay, let's talk about the first finale. I guess we should call it, where you get. Well, really, there are some new recruits that are reportedly showing up to the militia, and one of them is your exiled your exiled buddy Schizo, who outs you as says some really shitty lies and whatnot, and then it causes them to check and cross check that oh, he's got tattoos, look at his back, and they think Schizo's telling the truth. And this is another moment where Sarah just kind of can't really say anything
Right.
because it would blow their cover. And
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 you kind of sacrifice yourself for her.
right, and it should also be noted they were trying to just leave,
Yeah.
like they were on their way out of the camp. O'Brien was coming to pick them up, which we'll get to O'Brien too. He's our last big character we got to talk about.
Yeah.
But you get you were imprisoned and I think expected to be hung, and then Corey saves you.
And again, this is one of those reasons why I say this half of the game should have been focused on, cut the first half really out. Because again, like I said before, Curry was one of those characters I wanted more from.
Yeah,
And Curry, it would have been an interesting arc to see him because he actually believes in what's going on. But to see him transition from that to realizing how crazy everything's become would have been interesting and made for an interesting sad character.
I fucking fully expected him to show up at the final encounter
Yeah, and
and
kill the colonel.
just
Yeah,
like shit's going down, like you're having a tough time, and Curry comes in, he's like, "Yo, I'm here."
yeah, because he says he's going to like Reno to hook up with like another militia or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know, but like I don't remember exactly. I'm just bummed that he didn't come back. I wanted more Curry. I wanted more Captain Curry, man.
I wanted more Curry. Give me that. Give
I
me that
was
Curry.
I was still hungry. Still hungry for Curry. Yeah, so I wish he stuck around. He gives you the ring back. I don't even remember the reason he had it. It was basically just he saw it, he thought it was cool, he took it, I think.
Yeah.
That was basically
Yeah.
it. Which all right. And to the game's credit, to life's credit, like not everything can have this deep meaningful reason.
Right.
Sometimes it is as simple as, yeah, I thought it was cool, so I took it.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I kind of appreciate that from a realism standpoint. Like there
Yeah.
doesn't always need to be some profound reason. So I don't know, that was much appreciated.
It
But
was a troll moment.
yeah.
They were like, you thought this had meaning, but it really doesn't.
Right. So yeah, Curry leaves. You go to Lost Lake, repel a militia camp attack. Iron Mike dies. It sucks. You have to go save Sarah. You get this fucking truck. Oh, and this is the perfect time to bring this up because this is where this stuff really starts coming into play in the game. A little bit before it, when you had to test the napalm Molotovs that what's his face was developing.
The scientist dude, yeah.
Yeah, scientist dude. How did it take this long for us to have mandatory hordes?
And
So-
just so everybody understands, hordes are just literally hundreds of these freakers will be grouped together, and once you tick them off or they get notice of you, they will chase you incessantly. They basically have, even though you're dealing with like 200, 300 enemies, they have like one health bar.
Which I really
Yeah.
liked. I really liked
Yeah.
that.
The hordes were the best part of this game, in my opinion, in terms of like combat and gameplay. But I actually, I heard this complaint a lot where people felt like the hordes should have been introduced into the story a lot earlier.
Yes.
I actually appreciated running into hordes without knowing what the fuck I was getting into because it just made the game a lot more scary for me. And so
Yeah,
when I finally took down a horde in a way that was from my own brain, not someone teaching me how to take down this horde, it felt a lot more rewarding and fun. And I'm okay with what they did.
I
So
accidentally killed my first horde actually before I even got to Lost Lake Camp. Yeah, I
same,
just ran into it.
and that's
Yeah.
fine. I've really liked that too. I hordes were there, and you could run into them, when they were out on their nightly stroll. Um, but having them as a mandatory thing, you could go through almost the entire game without seeing a single one until
Yeah,
and this was another thing I totally forgot to mention. There's that one horde that you're introduced to while you're at Lost Lake that you and Iron Mike intend to blow up the cave to seal them in. That goes nowhere. It was pretty much to
Yeah.
yeah,
introduce you to the idea that, oh yeah, there's dynamite somewhere, go find it, and that's when
right,
Schizo betrays you.
right,
But I'm torn on whether or not I like that. But my point is, like, you're never forced to fight one until very close to the very end of the game. And
right.
with hordes being the big allure behind this game, and the most interesting thing in combat, I agree with you on that wholeheartedly, Delilah. Like, it's disappointing to see them made mandatory so late. And then when they
Yeah.
are made mandatory, you have to fight like three of them, two of which are like basically back to back.
And they're big. Like they're not one of the smaller ones.
Yeah.
And
So it
and
would have
like
been
why
really nice to have practice.
why do we never see it throughout the game? And again, this would have been a benefit running theme of chopping this game down, making it somewhat shorter. But then you would have room for things like why do we never see a horde actually attack a camp
Yeah.
or some kind of fixed position where like you have to fight a horde maybe with other NPCs like where you're in a fixed position, maybe there's a wall or some kind of embankment,
Yeah, and
and like a horde assaults you.
I also like that goes to another point I want to bring up is the two E3 gameplay demonstrations we saw. There was the first time they showed the game with the sawmill, and then the next year they showed you going through and finding this camp, and there was a horde nearby, and you blew up a wall to attract the horde, and you hid, and they came running in and took out the camp. I never found an interesting dynamic moment to use the enemies to my advantage. And
Hmm.
that's pretty much what the game was selling us on in the first place was the dynamic environments, the dynamics you can use in pitting enemies against each other. I never really felt like that was a possibility in the game.
Yeah, the world it honestly at a point got more annoying than anything, especially when it came to like managing fuel and any real like
We're gonna disagree on
procedure
that one for sure.
any real procedural stuff. Like I would see a question mark pop up, I would turn, try to get to it, and it would just disappear before, like as soon as I turned in the direction of the question mark, it would just disappear. So I almost never got to interact with any real procedural stuff. And then I would get pissed off because I'd be riding my bike and I'd just get sniped off it and have to deal with some shitty ambush that was fucking easy and unnecessary. And it just got to a point where I was fast traveling everywhere.
The question marks were a weird one because they would pop up on your mini map and then disappear, but they're actually still there. I was reading on Reddit because I was really confused about them. You're supposed to basically just head in that direction and you will find whatever it is they were pointing you to.
So like you getting sniped in the face was the question mark. You know, like they're like attracting you to those enemies that are there.
I think those
Oh,
ones just happened like
maybe.
kind of
Yeah.
like those like road attacks would just kind of happen whenever they
They
felt
would,
like
yeah.
happening. But there were like ones where you would see a question mark
People
and you'd
trapped
ride
in
by.
the car.
Yeah.
There would be a person trapped, and it was never worth it. Like you would be able to get like maybe a tiny bit of money and some, I guess whatever it was called, trust or respect.
To me, it
Mhm.
depends on the
camp.
camp. Some like Tucker's camp sucked because it gave you so little credits and no trust.
Yeah, but you were never there. You were almost never there.
Right, but like the other camps, like even Copeland's, it gave you a good amount of trust, and it was what helped me max that camp out. But like, sometimes it depends on the camp. Sometimes it was worth it. Sometimes it wasn't.
Yeah. Well,
The pr-
anywho.
the
Oh,
procedurally generated question marks were really they just serve the purpose to gain currency in the camp because each camp had its own currency. So that like if you did a question mark around there, you were more likely to gain more currency and trust towards that camp, which means you can get more guns and upgrades and bike upgrades and it was really just a leveling up thing, which is really
Well,
annoying,
you
I
could
think.
point them.
yeah.
You could point them
I
to whatever
felt
camp you wanted. Well, depending on the area, you could point them to a specific camp over another. It's just certain camps offered better rewards than other ones did.
others
Tucker's
lost.
Tucker's camp gave you basically nothing of worth
Yeah.
if you
Right.
if you sent survivors there.
Where it was mainly Lost Lake and the militia camp that gave you the good
Yeah,
stuff.
they gave you a good amount. Also, I
The
really
Chicago Chopper. Ooh.
Yeah.
I really liked how every camp had their own current like the world that they set up with the camps and whatnot. It made a lot of sense. Like you wouldn't have the same credits per for every single camp. They don't have a universal currency. They have their own. So I really liked that what they did there.
Well, they were
It
supposed
was
to be like
just
credits.
right. Yeah, yeah. But it's each camp has like their own like number of credits for you instead of a
Right.
shared
Right.
number. That's something I really appreciated.
Yeah, yeah.
And they also had their own inventory.
Yes. And certain camps, didn't have anything for bikes. They could just refuel, but they had really good arsenal of weapons.
Yeah.
So, um, but we, we
We should probably finish up with
yeah, I
the
was gonna
story
say
though.
we really got sidetracked. But I don't know. This all stemmed from the hordes, and the hordes. I don't know. Really bothered me that I had no practice going in, and that Sawmill horde did not go anything like the wall, like how they showed it in the E3 demo. I basically just ran a big circle around the entire sawmill, picking them
Yeah.
off. And like in the E3 demo, they show this whole dynamic thing of you running into the main barn and closing the door, and then busting through the door, and you closing the things on them, so they struggle to jump over them and whatnot.
I also
And
felt like when actually fighting the hordes, like it showed you laying traps like mines and shit. And I mean, they tell you in the game, they advise you to do this kind of stuff. And I would spend like 5, 10 minutes laying out my path, how I'm gonna run, like how I'm gonna lure the horde,
The
horde,
horse.
through like what path I'm gonna lead them on, lay my mines, my proximity bombs, all that shit. And then like there was something weird with the planted explosives in the game where like they would explode. The radius of detection for the explosives was like way too big. Like the horde
hmm
would not be within a range where they would be damaged, but it would go off anyway. And it just felt like a massive like it got to a point where I would run out of explosives. So what I would basically be doing is running back and forth, luring them out and in, out and in, shooting them down.
Yeah.
I don't
The,
know.
the most effective weapon against them was the napalm Molotovs.
and
Yeah, and the
then
machine gun. Yeah.
and then good luck finding growlers for those napalm Molotovs, because I eventually reached a point where I didn't have many of those because I couldn't find growlers for them. Uh, but yeah,
I just want to make a quick point. I did absolutely use enemies against enemies in the game, especially when it came to animal enemies like the wolves and the bear.
Fuck
Um,
wolves, man. Fuck wolves.
yeah, they sucked, but like I would like lure them into like a group of zombies to like attack the zombies so that I can explore the area more.
Wait, would they
But
attack zombies? I never saw that.
yeah.
man,
But like once
Jason
again,
and I
like you
played the
wouldn't
game totally wrong.
well,
Yeah.
like what Mark said, like you wouldn't run into a horde or you wouldn't see these like enemy fights if you don't explore. And like I'm a big explorer when it comes to video games, so like I got lucky. But unfortunately, I'm sure there's some people that just went from point A to B that never got to experience those things, and I think that's where a lot of complaints come from.
I think the most I did with pinning enemies against each other was I used the drifter crossbow for a very, very large chunk of the game, and
I
used
almost never used it.
See, I use those the bolts that make an enemy hate their enemies or whatever, or hate the
Yeah, they
friend.
go like berserk.
Yeah, like those ones. I use those a lot. I would basically go into any camp and just hit the first enemy I saw, and he'd just start killing his buddies while I did what you said, like explored a little bit and tried to find other paths in to maybe start
Yeah.
picking off people from behind.
I totally Rambo'd this game. Like I literally, as soon as I was at the militia camp, I had the Tommy gun, a machine gun, a fucking like Uzi or submachine gun or whatever as a sidearm. Like I was just fucking rolling in and mowing down shit. Like I didn't
Yeah.
even think strategically about it by the end.
And the game does like allow that of the player. You know, they give you plenty of options to to do silly things like that.
Yeah.
But all right, finale of
story.
the game. Yes, the story. Aha.
The second, well, so
The first ending.
the first ending, yeah,
Where
you kill Schizo.
Oh my god, yeah, that was so satisfying. I personally really like that. You go back, you storm the camp. We already know Boozer seemingly dies, even though he doesn't. But you kill some dudes, get in the Ark, confront Schizo, kill Schizo. Thank God. Fuck Schizo. That's all I really have to say about Schizo.
Did you
Yeah,
guys
this is
know
this-
that like he had like good grades and like was like a A student or something like that? I think there was
Yeah.
like a note that you read or something like that
They-
revealed that.
Yeah, they mentioned something about him being like he was a really intelligent youth.
Yeah.
You wouldn't peg
I
that
thought
of,
that was
of,
funny.
of that fucking dude.
Yeah, so just context. So basically, this is a retaliatory strike against the militia fortress after they try to destroy Lost Lake Camp and Iron Mike dies and everything. Yet for some reason, you're fighting your way up to the top of the fortress by yourself, as everybody else is fucking
Yeah,
on the
man,
ground.
everyone else
Yeah.
is busy.
Like-
Fucking slaying dudes, trying to find Captain Corey, get his help.
But
He doesn't
so
show up.
to bust open the gate, you and Boozer drive a truck full of fertilizer and like nitroglycerin or something. I don't know. Basically, it's just a giant explosive truck.
They drive a moving bomb.
Yeah, and you're led to believe that Boozer sacrificed himself, blew himself up to blow up the gate. So you fight your way to the top. You find the Colonel and Sarah, your wife.
And he doesn't
And-
have a bucket of fried chicken. He has a gun.
Yeah. Yep. And some tea.
Oh yeah, he does have that tea.
Did he fucking like kill himself, or did Sarah
No,
poison it?
She
Sarah-
poisoned him.
Sarah
Okay, she-
took whatever
okay.
that like deadly flower that she warned Deacon about, put it in his tea. He had no idea, and he died.
Yeah, that was her
Okay.
coolest moment.
That was her coolest moment. You were
I was
completely
confused about that at first. I was like, because like it didn't really like, at least to me, it didn't really like show that she was the one who did that. I don't know. At least I didn't see it.
It was.
You just know it because they have a mission where you're basically gathering flowers with Deacon for like 20 minutes. And
Oh, that's right, like the nightshade or whatever. I don't
and
remember.
we
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
and we see the flower or we see the flower in the tea. So you're just led to understand that she was being sneaky and slayed the Colonel. And that
But
was
the real ending.
yeah, the real ending. We have not mentioned O'Brien
And
like at all.
Boozer, by the way, as we said before, is still alive.
Yeah,
After the fight, he shows up.
he's got a knife. Oh no, he doesn't just have a knife arm. He also has an ice cream scoop arm that he used
Yeah.
for the stick shift on the
Yes.
truck. I love
Yes.
that. That was really
Yeah.
great. But yeah, he's got that, and he's got his puppy. But yeah, we haven't talked about O'Brien.
So Brian was seen from the get. Like you see him in the helicopter, you're trying to get him to save Sarah, to treat her or whatever.
In-
he was
in
like,
the
"No, I'm
opening.
not going to do it." Yeah, in the opening.
He's just a grad student.
Yeah, he's
And
basically an intern.
He's a member of Nero, this shady government organization you see throughout the game, who you can't get in firefights with because they have crazy Nero tech and apparently are bulletproof.
yeah.
And so there's a quest line where that's all you're doing for hours.
Yeah, pretty much. You like there's other things you can do with Nero. Like there's the Nero checkpoints that you can go and explore and get like little data tapes that give you, you know, some insight into really a lot
What
of them
happens, yeah.
is just like, "Oh, what's that over there? Oh, it's nothing. What's that over there? Oh, it's a zombie." And then lots of screaming and then it's over. That's how I felt about a lot of those data recordings. But the actual
Yeah.
missions, you got some you started getting like some interesting information about the freakers and the infection as it would be.
They talk a lot about their shit.
Yeah, they do. Well, I mean, they're scientists. They have to analyze that. It's fine. But
I feel like Jeff Goldblum. That's a big pile of shit.
okay, O'Brien.
Jurassic Park reference.
O'Brien really wants to know like what the other researchers are researching, and he gives you information about your wife before you obviously know that she's alive. This is really early on in the game. This is another character that like runs from top to bottom, for the most part, and you know he helps you to come to this conclusion that your wife is dead, and then he helps you come to the conclusion that oh she's not, and then almost helps you guys escape, doesn't because you already got found out, yada yada yada. We get our first good ending. You know, they end the militia. Everyone's all hunky dory happy. Deacon and Sarah live a happy, harmonious life. And O'Brien calls you up and says, "Hey,
We gotta talk."
let's go on one last date." And Deacon's like, "Babe, I found my wife." He's like, "Nah. This is important. I need you. I need you now." So they go and meet at the graveyard, and we never see O'Brien's face because he's always wearing that hazmat suit, and you can't see anything until now
Yep.
when he says, "You know how I said they're evolving? The freakers are evolving." Yeah. Takes off his helmet, and he's bald. And that's the game. That's Days Gone.
He's a freaker.
Yeah.
And then he fucking like he doesn't even wait for the helicopter to land. He just jumps into the air onto the helicopter.
Yeah.
It's like fucking X-Men. Like
Yeah, yeah, you know how I said that I really liked the cheesy, like, happy-go-lucky ending, like the first ending where, you know, Sarah and Deacon are like, "Oh, I love you. Oh, I love you too. Oh, I'm so glad we found each other. Oh, I'm so glad the Colonel's dead." Yada, yada, yada. Yeah, I hated this ending.
so did I.
I really liked it, but I'm also a dark bitch. Like, I don't know. I like the fact that they set up the stage for Days Gone 2. I like the fact that you did not have to play this mission, that most people that beat this game probably never played this, probably never saw this, what I think is the true ending.
Oh, it absolutely
It was
is.
completely optional, and he basically has control over this infection. So for Days Gone 2, we know that we're going to see like people that have control of it, and what that's going to mean for the world. I don't know, but I'm really interested to see it.
I don't know why when he jumped in the helicopter and it flew away, I felt like they should have played like the music from the ending, well, the post-credit ending of Metal Gear Solid 3 when he's on the phone with the president and then he hangs up after saying Mr. President and it's like da 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 da. Like I felt like that music should have played after he got on the
It's
helicopter.
like big, like, revelatory music.
Like Austin Powers, da, na, 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 like something like that.
I love when you guys impersonate music. It really just makes me so happy. But
Anywho,
I see what you're saying, Delilah. To an extent, I agree. Maybe I would like it more. I don't know. A lot of the freakers we encounter throughout the game, there's like the normal freakers, there's the newts, there's the screamers, there's the breakers. They're all just
kind of sounded like you just said nudes. I was about to laugh.
yeah. There was all those saucy nudes in the game. No, there's all these different subtypes of zombies that I guess we've seen in other properties. The most interesting ones, in my opinion, were like the ragers, the big zombified bears. I don't even remember what the zombie crows were called.
Right.
Those were fucking annoying. I
They
didn't even realize they were freakers with nests at first.
Yeah.
So I was looking for like the traditional nests that you had to destroy, and I was riding around. I'm like, where the fuck are the nests? I'm literally standing right next to it.
Oh
I
yeah.
didn't realize it was in the fucking tree, and then all of a sudden the birds are attacking me, because this isn't introduced until like halfway through the game.
No, it's
Yeah.
it's introduced in that last act when you go down to the Wizard Island.
Yeah,
I found the animal freakers to be the most interesting, and I guess we do start to see some sort of semblance of intelligence with the freakers once we start getting introduced to the screamers, and those really fast ones.
Oh yeah. They look like an old man freaker. Oh my
Yeah,
god, what were
and
they
they
called?
like they just come in, swipe you, and oh, reachers. They were called reachers.
Reachers.
I have
Yeah.
no idea why they were called reachers, but you start to see, I guess gradually you start to see some semblance of intelligence. So, but not enough where I can fully believe that this virus has evolved and mutated to a point where all these like scientists, a highly intelligent scientists that are studying things are infected with the infection and they're essentially intelligent zombies.
yeah,
I
and
didn't
and
feel believable to me.
they could never really take advantage of different enemy types either, because the whole premise is supposed to be you you preventing yourself from getting overwhelmed by masses of or freakers. So it's kind of hard unless you're in a story mission to do like one-on-ones, or even dealing with a small group of enemies with kind of the different types mixed together. Because otherwise it just becomes fucking impossible, and then why even deal with it?
Hmm.
Just
Yeah.
go around the enemy.
Yeah, for sure. And we've already kind of set our piece on the hordes. The most interesting enemy, really, just yeah. But that's pretty much the story of Days Gone. There's a few other things that I think we can and should talk about. Um, we've kind of already talked about the storyline structure. I mean, we just read
Yeah.
down like most of the important storylines. Um, Delilah, you said this really early on, and it rang. It rang true for me as Jason and I lagged behind your progress in the game. You said really early on to us that completionism is basically a requirement,
Yeah.
and that's pretty much that's all the storylines.
Yeah.
Like we were saying earlier, there's a linear structure to them, even though there really shouldn't be, and it really forces you to do everything, whether or not that's your style. And
Yes, like main storylines will not unlock unless you've completed like a certain amount of side. It's weird.
yeah, it really is, and a little frustrating.
Yeah. I mean, the reason, especially why I said that, is once you beat the game, your platinum is right there if you're
Hmm.
going for it. It took you very quickly to platinum it once you beat it. So it kind of forces you to be a completionist, and I can see how that turned a lot of people off.
Yeah, and especially because the game is just really long.
Yeah.
It's funny. You always want the most bang for your buck, but at a certain point, you want to move on.
Well, I think they could have kept the amount of content they had in terms of side stuff. If they had just made the main storyline playable, just as a one-shot thing, like you could just progress mission to mission and totally ignore the side stuff. Maybe
Yeah,
it would make it harder for you, because you wouldn't progress your character in terms of skills and health and stamina and all that stuff. The like light RPG elements that are in the game. Maybe you wouldn't get as good weapons over the course of that time, but it would still be possible if you just wanted to play for the story.
right. Um, so doubling off of the length of the game, the storyline structure. I know this is something Jason was itching to talk about a lot.
I'm not really itching to talk about it. I just fucking hate having to deal with fuel for the motorcycle.
Oh.
Because honestly, it made the game feel longer for me because even though I was fast traveling, like it would, probably the loading screen was almost as long as going on the bike
Oh
itself.
man. Yo,
But
loading up the game for the first time, there were so many. I eventually reached a point where I would never quit out of the game because it would take so long to load
Yeah.
back into it.
I was worried
Yeah.
my game was fucked up the first time I loaded. And and speaking of that, like even though at this point there have been so many patches for the game already, it kind of when it was released early access for like reviewers, apparently it was really fucked up.
Yeah.
Which some people say might have contributed to the lower scores. I don't know about that, but even now with all the patches I think it's like already like 7 or 8 patches that came out or something like that.
I think more than that.
Like I still had crashes going on. I lost a lot of progress due to crashes.
It'll take them a long time to iron all that stuff out.
And the frame rate, oh my god, the frame rate dipped so much. I mean, I'm not usually a big stickler for these things, but it would really like interfere with the actual gameplay, especially when it came to hordes and when you're riding on the motorcycle across big open environments where it has to render a ton of shit. Like, it's just something that should be mentioned.
Yeah, I didn't run into too many issues like that, thankfully.
Now, my my biggest issue was the more dynamic hordes, and I say dynamic because you could just be out and about somewhere, and all of a sudden, 100 enemies.
Attacked, yeah.
No, not even attacked. I would physically witness 100 enemies pop out of nowhere.
Oh
10
yeah,
feet in
that happened
front
to
of
me
me.
once. Yes, that did happen to me. I have a video clip of it on my old hard drive because I upgraded to an SSD. I'm gonna share it, and I'll probably put that link in the comments.
Okay, yeah, please do.
Yeah.
Because oh man, it happened to me. It happened to me during a mission. There was a mission where you go into a mine to free somebody, and right after you freed him, I would go to leave, and there was an elevator shaft nearby, and all of a sudden, like 100 dudes just show up and start running at me from that elevator shaft. Like inexplicably, out of nowhere, they just show up.
Was that the one in the Arcanist cave?
Yes.
Yeah, so that I think was purposeful.
They
'cause
did not do a good job at convincing me it was purposeful.
Well, because the thing is when you're approaching a horde, you hear like this weird music. It's like ding,
Yeah.
ding. And so I heard that when I was like killing the Arcanist and going through the cave to rescue that guy. And I had that ability where you could see like the infrared of bodies through walls. So I saw all of them like curled up in the cave, and
Wait,
so I knew they were there.
You're not talking about the cave where you see the Reacher for the first time, are you?
No, I don't know. It
Because
wasn't
that
one.
that one was definitely part of the story that a horde comes at you after you kill the Reacher.
Yeah, that was
Yes.
purposeful. And so I think so was this. I think it was like a side activity.
Oh, okay. Maybe it was. It didn't come across that way to me.
Yeah, because they came down really fast.
It didn't even look like they came down at all. It looked like they just like spawned
Yeah.
in this little nook and started running at me. I digress. I did. There were other instances where I just saw them spawn like 10 feet in front of me.
Yeah, I had that too.
But that was the most memorable, even if it was purposeful.
I actually killed a whole horde, and there was like a little slither of the health left, and I was like, "What the hell? I can't find this last freaker." And then my game like bugged out, and then all of a sudden, all 100 of them spawned right next to me, and I was like, "Oh my god, I have to upload that video."
No. So go ahead, Jason.
I was just gonna say. So anyway, Mark.
Oh. Okay.
The
So
fuel management?
I loved the fuel management.
Me too.
Jason, all you got to do is pump gas every now and then, man. Stop fast traveling everywhere.
So fast traveling, I feel like took more fuel than actually driving somewhere.
Probably did.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Jason's not having any of it.
I just felt like it didn't really add anything to the experience for me.
For me, it
was
made
more
me shook.
It was more annoying when I ran out of fuel and then I had to run around and find somewhere to get fuel. And it would just be like a waste of 45 minutes an hour.
I never had that problem because I took care of my bike and refueled it when I saw it was getting low.
I I will say that towards the late game, when you upgrade your fuel tank, it becomes far less of a problem.
Yeah, but also there's fuel tanks everywhere. As long as you see houses and cars, there's probably a fuel tank.
See,
So
that
like
wasn't
whenever I was on yellow, I would make sure to go to like wherever I saw houses and stuff
see,
and look
that
around.
wasn't my experience. For some reason, I could only ever find them at gas stations.
Oh,
I was
Mm.
having a real hard time finding them in like houses and shit.
Did you?
yeah.
Were you
I
wearing
would
your
constantly
glasses?
I would constantly get fucking rags and sterilizer, which I always was in full supply of, but I would never actually get anything I needed.
Yeah. Um, and I wasn't even. And Jason, when I mentioned like the thing that you really want to talk about, I wasn't even talking about fuel management. I was talking
Uh,
about open worlds.
Oh.
oh. Yeah.
'Cause I know this is a hot topic for you.
No, I'm just kind of sick of open worlds unless you're actually going to take the time to design a map um that's not even necessarily fully open, like something more in the vein of a game like the recently released God of War, where you can kind of explore the world, go back and forth between different areas. You learn more about it, become more familiar as you go through it. It's not completely open. It's relatively big, but
It's not open, but it's open-ish.
yeah, open-ish.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sick of open worlds that are just big open expanses that you don't even end up experiencing most of it, unless you spend hundreds of hours exploring and going through every nook and cranny for no real reason. Like I felt like, especially the northeastern part of the map, I almost never, if ever, really went to it. Um, I don't know. I felt like this game would have benefited, and not necessarily being a strictly linear in the sense of like a Naughty Dog game, but more like God of War. But again, that goes along with me believing that in terms of the content of the narrative, it should have been cut in half and focused more on the conflict between Lost Lake Camp, the militia, the differences in philosophy between the Colonel and Iron Mike. Um,
I agree with
yeah,
you that the narrative could have been more straightforward, especially for people like you who are kind of sick of open worlds. And I am too sick of open world games. I kind of wish they would have less of them. But I feel like for a game like Days Gone, it was beneficial, especially because of the hordes. But yeah, I do wish there were generally less open world games so that we don't feel so fatigued when we finally do get one.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know. I keep going back and forth of like, it's an open world game. I can't imagine any other way they would have done this game in terms of how they structured the narrative and how the open world works with it. But at the same time, I do wish it was somewhat different.
it's just they tried to pack too much in. I feel like
Yeah,
I can see why this game took so long to develop now.
yeah, and transitioning from that, one of the last few things I want to talk about before we end it here. Uh, you talked about packing stuff in. We got for side content, more side content than what we've already talked about. We got those Ripper camps, we got ambush camps, we got Marauder camps.
Oh, God.
They were all pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, kill 12 or 15 people.
The biggest the one that had the most differences were the ambush camps, and that's because they gave you like a bunker that was used as a fast travel point. Um,
And you would usually get a reward. The only helpful thing I thought was the maps that
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of cleared out the area, or cleared up the area on your map so you could see exactly where everything was. But you would also be rewarded with recipes for crafting. But I always felt like I would get recipes I already had,
you'd
like
get
from the main quests.
you'd get recipes. You got recipes for things like you were able to craft things, but there were some things that I was like in full supply of by the time I got the recipe because I just found them. Like I found not frag grenades, pipe bombs quite a lot before I got the recipe for them.
Oh no, yeah.
And then
So I agree with that, but I'm saying like I would be rewarded a crafting recipe from like completing a main quest line, and then I would get that same crafting recipe from a bunker.
oh, that might have just been a coincidence.
Yeah,
Might have been two things that were like really closely named or something. Like the
maybe,
proximity mines and the proximity bombs, which I
maybe
still am not really sure what the difference was.
one of them you trigger. I think
Oh,
like you actually hit a button to trigger.
okay. I guess that
Yeah.
kind of shows how much I use those in my playthrough. Um, yeah, I think at one point, there was a marauder camp that they straight up called a marauder camp that had rippers. They just used those two like definitely interchangeably, and it just
Yeah.
what's the point? What's the difference? There is none. And there were a lot of collectibles. Some of them were interesting. Most of them weren't. I
No.
like the whole. This is more a design thing. I like when you pick up a collectible and there's like a thing on the screen that says, "You got this. Click this to view it," and then you can go right in there. That is more so gonna prompt me to actually read what it has to say.
Like Uncharted.
Yeah, like Uncharted to view the treasures or to read notes or something. The Last of Us lets you read notes and stuff like that. A lot of games, function that way, and this one didn't. You'd pick up a tourism pamphlet, and I'd have to go into my menu, go to collectibles, go to the thing, find the
Yeah.
thing, and then view it if I wanted to find out more. And
Yeah, I didn't even bother with that kind of shit.
they had those the landmarks, and I would have totally loved to read about them if it was just more accessible in the UI.
Yeah.
So it really just seemed that's another thing that seemed like an afterthought. Oh, we're an open world game. We should have collectibles, right?
Hmm.
So, there's one more. Do you guys have anything else? There's one more thing I want to bring up.
No.
One last question I want to pose. We're getting a sequel.
Hmm.
Like we 100% are. Game sold really well. We got that fucking ending. Delilah, I'm sorry. I know you like it, but that fucking ending. Um,
I
yeah.
wish we weren't. I wish. I mean, not that I don't want Sony Ben to like be closed down. I'm glad
Oh,
that
I want to.
they sold well. They sold well. I kind of.
I absolutely want to see what they're capable of, which is why I'm posing the question. Because we're gonna get a sequel to this game. It's pretty much a given. What would you guys want to see different? What would you want to see change from this game to that one?
I think less like fluff, like the
Yeah.
Marauder camps and all that shit. Less Nero checkpoints, like maybe another way to upgrade your stamina and health, or
Yeah.
less of them.
Completely different character and settings. I would actually like to see them follow Captain Curry, see where he goes, he ends up. It'd actually be cool if like it took place in like Reno, in like a desert environment.
Mhm.
Um, with freaker hordes, I would like to see them again focus on the hordes, be more creative with it, set up combat scenarios like defending a fixed position against an attack by a horde, um, with other NPCs at your side. Don't always make it like you have to go in by yourself and take on this horde by yourself. Yes, obviously you want scenarios where you also can use stealth and lay traps and be smart with it, but yeah, I think I feel like these characters. I don't think there's nowhere really they can go with them. I don't think.
Okay. I personally, I would. I agree with Delilah less fluff, but mostly I want them. I like that. I really like that storyline idea. I just want it to be refined. I don't want it to be like, yeah, you have these storylines and they all have their own separate progression, but it's all linear anyway, so it doesn't really matter. No, I want something that's a little more dynamic that lets you focus on the stories that you care about and how somehow they can work out the narrative so that works in a logical way. That's really what I want to see from a sequel.
Maybe have actual choice making in the story. Maybe you have multiple camps, but your relation with one might affect your relationship with another in storyline affecting ways. Similar to how like you'll see a Bethesda Fallout game, or really any Fallout game, might have a few factions tied to the main storyline, and you kind of navigate between them, and ultimately the ending will depend on which one you ultimately side with.
Yeah.
When I first read this question, Mark, when you sent us the show notes, I thought, what if it was like a co-op experience where, like, let's say it was like you and Boozer going through and somebody had like a knife arm. But then I feel like you might be stepping over each other's toes, especially when fighting hordes. So I don't see how it would work out, but that was my initial thought until I really thought about it. And I was like, no, that's dumb.
I think that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Fighting hordes co-op.
As an option, yeah, I think that could be cool. I don't know that I want to do a main campaign co-op.
I'm not talking about necessarily a campaign. Yeah,
that's fair. They'll do what they did with Uncharted. The second one comes out, it's like, all right, add multiplayer.
Yeah.
But all right, that was Days Gone that we just talked about. We just talked about for nearly 2 hours.
Well, really? Wow.
Yes, this yeah. So, let's skip what we've been playing because I think we've all been playing the next game on the Read the Spoils list.
Oh, I haven't yet.
Okay, that episode will be coming as soon as Jason finishes it.
We're scheduled for next week to record that.
Yeah, no, but I told you I'm gonna beat it this weekend.
And I do kind of want to start announcing the next game that we're playing at the end of the previous episode, so that if someone does want to play through it alongside the episode, they have the opportunity to. The next game we're doing is Uncharted: Drake's Fortune.
Yeah.
The very first Uncharted game.
Platinumed it again.
So did I.
Nice.
And I got all those
special.
And I got all those extended collection trophies. Brutal was surprisingly okay.
Nice.
But that is the next game that we're doing. Shortly after this one goes live, we will be recording that and then publishing it to all of our podcast feeds. Those are iTunes, Google Podcasts, and Spotify, as well as YouTube. And if you listen on any single one of those, please rate us, comment if it's YouTube, give it a like if it's YouTube, subscribe to the channel, Dead Cell Media. If you liked the episode, if you didn't like it, tell us why. I'm curious. If you did like it, tell us why. I'm curious. Blame me, apparently. Yeah, that's all I got. You can follow me on Twitter at Nibelheimian. Delilah's at Assassina_San.
Yes.
Jason is... Don't follow Jason. Just...
I'm not on Twitter anyway. I mean, I am, but I have an account. But
yeah, his account's at Solid Quaz, but don't follow him. He doesn't.
Yeah, I mean,
he doesn't do
care.
anything. He doesn't care. And
I'm not on Twitter.
Yeah, I know. And then you can follow you could follow Dead Cell Media on Twitter at Dead Cell Media. You can also find us on Facebook. There's a Facebook group. Join the Facebook group. Find Dead Cell Media on Facebook. Join the group. And that's all I really got. So thanks for listening.
Peace out.
Goodbye, Mr. President. Dun, 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 dun.